Greetings from Spoiled Vision Movie Recaps. Today, we explore an action-packed horror sci-fi titled Day of Reckoning. Warning: spoilers ahead. Proceed with caution. To control the population, every 15 years, a deity unleashes countless monsters upon the world. Despite humanity's attempts to resist, the monsters prove overpowering, forcing people into hiding. The film commences with the backstory of the initial Judgment Day. Subsequently, swarms of monsters emerge from ordinary minds, wreaking havoc by killing millions and decimating cities. A full-fledged war against these creatures ensues, culminating in their extermination. In the aftermath, protective structures such as gates are erected atop the former wells to shield against potential incursions. 15 years pass, during which the world gradually recuperates from the horrors endured. Among the fortunate survivors is Laura, employed at a school. She grapples with a persistent yet unsuccessful suitor, Milton, who she intermittently declines to date. This reluctance may stem from lingering resentment toward her ex-husband, Dave, who was absent during the initial Judgment Day, leaving Laura to fend for herself while pregnant. Dave and Laura share a 15-year-old son, Tyler. Tyler spends his days at the skate park with friends and his girlfriend, Maddie. In his spare time, he immerses himself in computer games and becomes a bargaining chip in the complex relationship between his estranged parents, who parted ways soon after his birth. Meanwhile, tension mounts. An impending eclipse serves as a foreboding harbinger of a potential monster resurgence. Heightened seismic activity prompts emergency inspections of the protective dome, while troubling news reports of a widespread fish die-off emerge, echoing events from 15 years prior. During one weekend, Tyler stays at his father's place when a phone call interrupts the calm. Dave's old friend Ted believes that the new Judgment Day is imminent and insists that Dave urgently relocate his family to Ted's shelter before the eclipse. Simultaneously, the first monster infiltrates the protective dome, stealthily ascending the stairs. Laura contacts Dave, alarmed by the news, and demands that he retrieve Tyler immediately. Milton has secured a shelter and believes it's their sole salvation. Dave reassures Laura, asserting that he's Tyler's father and that his son is safe with him. However, Tyler receives a text message, reads it, and discreetly leaves the house while his father is occupied. Laura panics, realizing that Dave's house lacks security, and implores him to bring Tyler to her without delay. Dave consents, heading toward Tyler's room, only to find it empty. Milton hurries Laura, urging her to move quickly as the shelter is filling up rapidly. She explains her concern about not being able to locate Tyler. Milton uses his phone to track Tyler down at the skate park. Tyler is indeed at the park with Maddie, who is visibly anxious because her parents have left her alone. Fearing for her safety, Maddie implores Tyler not to leave her. Tyler assures Maddie that he won't repeat his father's actions and abandon her. Suddenly, the sound of birds in distress fills the air as huge flocks migrate in one direction, sending parkgoers into a panicked frenzy, fleeing the scene. Meanwhile, Dave heads to the park in search of Tyler, but becomes ensnared in a colossal traffic jam. Determined to find his son, he abandons his car. Under the protective dome, a worker checks the instruments, only to be met with rustling and strange sounds. A monster emerges, swiftly attacking and dismembering the worker. Nearby soldiers open fire, but their ordinary bullets prove ineffective. Tyler and Maddie, wide-eyed with fear, witness the chaos unfolding. Dave arrives, and Tyler explains the situation, emphasizing that he couldn't leave Maddie alone. Laura, accompanied by Milton, arrives and ushers everyone to the pre-booked shelter seats. With just over an hour remaining before the eclipse, the city descends into chaos, with people scrambling to escape amidst traffic gridlock. Eventually, they reach the shelter, but it's cordoned off by the military, allowing only women and children inside. Dave instructs Tyler to look after his mother and guides them to the shelter. Laura and Maddie remain in the crowd. However, Tyler defies the orders and runs back to his father. Laura and Maddie chase after him, and Tyler insists that he won't leave his father behind. Meanwhile, the scoreboard flashes a message that the shelter is at full capacity, with no more available spots. Without hesitation, they rush back to their car. Dave suggests heading to Ted's hideout in the desert, while Milton proposes taking refuge in the nearby school with its basement. They encounter yet another traffic jam, with numerous cars blocking the road. They abandon the car as an earthquake commences, casting a shadow over the solar disk. The eclipse begins. Under the protective dome, the monsters emerge in droves, swarming the city through various modes of locomotion. Dave advocates for leaving the city, deeming it too dangerous to stay. He expresses his intention to drive, but this sparks a heated argument with Milton, who insists that it's his car and that he knows the best course of action. However, their dispute is abruptly interrupted as a flying monster seizes Milton, carrying him into the sky. Laura lets out a heart-wrenching scream, and Dave swiftly shoves her into the car, determined to escape the nightmare. They navigate along the canal, with Dave reassuring the children that everything will be all right, and they will find a way out. Unfortunately, the car runs low on fuel, prompting Dave to seek out a replacement among the several cars ahead. Dave slips into one of the parked cars and discovers an elderly man hidden in the back seat. Their attention is drawn to a massive blood-covered monster resembling a bull's skeleton, dangerously close to their car. The bull proceeds to gnaw on a lifeless body nearby, completely unaware of their presence. Silently, Dave rolls the car back toward Laura and the children. Both cars now stand side by side, but they need to switch to a different vehicle. Unfortunately, the bull eventually spots them. In a desperate move, the elderly man exits the car and sprinkles salt from a jar he was holding on the bull. Miraculously, the bull halts, allowing the kids and Laura to sprint into Dave's car. The bull then charges at the man, tearing him apart, but Dave manages to drive away from the perilous scene. An onslaught of monsters converges upon the city from all directions. Dave navigates an isolated mountain road until they reach Ted's secure hideout, a concrete bunker with rooftop cameras. Knocking on the doors yields no response, but they soon discover Ted sitting behind a monitor, held at gunpoint by an unidentified individual. Meanwhile, monsters surge in a horde down the mountain, headed straight for the shelter. Dave grabs a tire iron in a desperate attempt to protect his family, but at the last moment, the bunker doors open, and they rush inside. Relieved, Dave embraces Ted, who introduces his wife, Stella, also present in the bunker, along with a silent military man named Corporal Garrett Jensen. Monitors display the monsters relentlessly trying to breach the door, keeping everyone on edge. Curious, Maddie inquires about how the monsters sense them, whether they can see through walls. Garrett smirks and explains that the monsters react to light and heat, but suggests they may also perceive their souls. Laura asks if Garrett is religious, and he replies affirmatively, saying he became religious on the first Judgment Day when he worked at a refinery. Garrett recounts how he survived by immersing himself in a pond of salty mud, which deterred the monsters from approaching. He listened as the creatures annihilated 150 of his colleagues and friends. Engrossed in his tale, Garrett fails to notice Ted signaling Dave to retrieve a knife. Dave comprehends the signal and discreetly takes the knife. Garrett continues, describing Judgment Day as a day when the devil reigns supreme, asserting that even God is involved. As he speaks, something resembling a centipede crawls from the street and enters a small hole in the mesh covering the window. Garrett volunteers to take the first watch, and Ted extends an invitation for them to stay, casting a meaningful glance at Dave. However, Garrett swiftly draws his gun from its holster, compelling Dave to relinquish the knife. He reveals that he stumbled upon this hideout while attempting to hide and was allowed in by Ted's kind wife, Stella. Despite Ted's reservations, Garrett emphasizes his determination to survive at any cost, having already endured the first Judgment Day. Tyler attempts to wrestle the gun from Garrett, but Garrett repels him. Dave steps in to console the corporal. In a sudden turn of events, a centipede-like monster lunges at Stella, who is standing nearby. Ted manages to pry it off her neck, dousing it in salt. Dave wrests the gun from Garrett and shoots the creature. Other monsters emerge, but the group successfully fends them off. They restrain Garrett and tend to Stella's injuries. Dave spots a massive bull approaching, realizing their dire predicament. They urgently need to exit the bunker as the bull relentlessly attempts to breach the doors. Ted hesitates, fearing that his wife won't survive outside. Stella, however, urges him to leave with the group, disclosing the presence of an underground passage beneath the bunker that leads to the mountains. Garrett convinces Ted to bring him along, as he possesses a car with a full tank that can transport them to safety, emphasizing that he wants to help them now that it's in his interest. Although skeptical, the group agrees. Dave promises Garrett that they'll forget about everything if he delivers them to safety. Armed with an arsenal of weapons from Ted, they brace themselves. The Bulls' attempts to breach the doors intensify, but they manage to escape into the tunnel. They reach the car, but Stella falls ill. Tensions rise as Dave and Laura engage in an argument, with Laura reproaching Dave for not seeking refuge in the shelter earlier. Tyler then notices a dead monster on the side of the road, and Maddie approaches it. Suddenly, long tentacles emerge from a hole in the ground, ensnaring her legs and attempting to drag her away. Maddie screams, and Tyler and Dave come to her rescue. Garrett offers his assistance, and Dave cuts the ropes binding his hands. They ascend to the mountaintop and witness a city in ruins, engulfed in flames. Descending to the car, they discover that it won't start. Monsters appear atop the mountain, charging straight toward them. Garrett struggles to start the engine, while Stella surveys the approaching horde of monsters and the gun in her husband's hands. Stella retrieves her own gun and steps out of the car, ignoring Ted's pleas to hand it over. She walks toward the monsters, accepting her fate. Ted calls out to her tearfully, but Dave pushes him back into the car. In the nick of time, they manage to escape with hordes of monsters in pursuit. Along the way, they intercept a radio signal. The radio report informs them that most of the shelters have succumbed to the onslaught and have been destroyed. Laura places her hand on Dave's shoulder as he comforts her. They arrive at the gate, which stands open but empty. Garrett explains that the hideout is in the basement, but they need to restore power first. Dave and Garrett decide to undertake this task, while the others search for a first aid station because Ted has a wound on his back. Dave successfully restores electricity, and Garrett reveals that the gate had been prepared for a second invasion, with tons of salt pumped into it, but the well was too deep. Rejoining the rest of the group, they suddenly hear the roar of monsters and discover a bloodied corpse. With 2 hours remaining until the end of the eclipse, Garrett suggests seeking refuge in a chemical warehouse with impenetrable doors. However, a monster attacks Garrett, and he and Dave manage to fend it off. The commotion attracts more monsters, and Garrett quickly escapes through a door, injecting himself with something as his veins turn swollen and black. Dave returns to his family, instructing Tyler to protect his mother while he's away. His plan is to level the playing field by channeling salt water through the tank pipes to deter the monsters. Laura kisses Dave and urges him to be cautious. Dave navigates through the ventilation system and witnesses a monster devouring his prey. He needs to turn off the taps near the chewing monster. Dave successfully opens the faucet, collecting water in containers. As he climbs back, the monster detects him and gives chase. Dave fights back, dousing it with salt until the creature crumbles to dust. Meanwhile, the others have been hunted down and encircled by monsters. Tyler opens fire in defense. Dave's voice comes over the loudspeaker, requesting the activation of the fire alarm. The monsters draw closer, surrounding them. Ted tells Tyler to protect the family son and confronts the monsters with an axe. Several monsters converge on him simultaneously. Tyler fires back, but his ammunition runs out. He activates the fire alarm, releasing jets of salt water from all sides, which shower the monsters, causing them to disintegrate into bloody dust while squealing in agony. They are saved, but Ted has sacrificed himself. As the eclipse ends, all the monsters return through the gate. The children, with Laura, rush out to a designated area where Garrett stands with a gun. He shoots Tyler, claiming that it's no longer their world and that he won't survive anyway, as God has a day off. He takes aim again, and Laura tries to shield her son with her body. In a dramatic turn of events, Dave intervenes, striking Garrett in the head with a fire extinguisher. Garrett falls to the floor, and Dave rushes to protect Tyler and Laura. At that moment, a colossal monster emerges from below. The massive monster lunges at Garrett, who was closer to it, and slowly engulfs him entirely. The group rushes into the medical unit, concocting a salty mixture in a cylinder as the monster draws closer. The creature kicks down the doors, but Dave manages to hurl a canister of the mixture at it. The canister explodes, causing the monster to roar wildly and disintegrate into ash. Laura embraces Dave, overwhelmed by disbelief at their miraculous rescue. The two couples exit the medical unit. The world may be in ruins, but the monsters have vanished. Perhaps this is yet another respite, but one thing remains clear: life will endure, and light will perpetually triumph over darkness. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification for more movie recaps.